Welcome to another Family Life Ministry program. Today's program is hosted by the Forever Young Ministry, also known as the 50 Plus Ministry. And our topic today is Social Media 101. This program is the outgrowth of the realization that several older members in our church community have limited skills navigating the internet or mastering their smartphones, and they struggle quite a bit with social media. In fact, it appears that many avoid social media completely and have difficulty even accessing Zoom meetings. So this program is one step of many to follow, where we attempt to help and guide those who are beginners or who are thinking of engaging in social media as they move toward and engage in social media activities. There is no shame in not knowing or having difficulty with social media. The key is to take the first step. As one famous philosopher said, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. My name is Wayne Greaves, and my guests tonight are Clint Brown, David Gitau, and Neil Baudoin. Our format will be a brief overview of a few popular social media platforms, followed by a panel discussion. First, however, I'll ask each panelist to introduce himself. And I'll start with David. The questions that I'll ask each of you are the following. What do you do? How long you've used social media? What is your major reason for use? And I'll come back and ask you about the platform of your choice and why. So tell us what you do, how long have you been using social media, and what is the primary reason why you use social media? David first.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and share. I'm a senior project manager with the Food and Drug Administration, and I've used social media for about probably more than 12 years now. And my favorite, I would say probably my most favorite is Wall Street Journal, WhatsApp, and a podcast. Those I would say are the main ones that I use.
And so your major reason for using them, you'd say, is for information?
Mostly connecting to friends, news sharing, and of course for any, I would say staying abreast of what's going on. That's mainly my main motivation to getting into them.
Okay, Clint, tell us.
Thank you again, Doc and gentlemen, for having me come on with you tonight. I am considered the vicinage coordinator of interpreting services. That's a long way of saying that I organize interpreting at the judiciary. I work for the state of New Jersey, the Superior Court, located in Union. I have been using social media for about 20 plus years now, since my high school days.
You're a veteran.
Of course, yeah. Of course, in the beginning, the major reason for use was connecting with friends. It's kind of shifted as I've gotten older, more so to rapid news gathering. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay, let's go to you, Neil.
Thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. And Neil Baudoin, for those who already know me. And by trade, I'm a computer information science major, but I work for private equity firms right now. I've been working in financial services for the past few years, life and science. And social media, as far as I recall it, if I have to go back to the days of 1990, 91, AOL to me was the first platform when it comes to social media. You got mail. We're all familiar with that term. But personally, WhatsApp is my favorite one these days. And the reason being, it's like an instant message type of communication for me. But I get to create my group chat, Facebook a little bit. But with all that's going on and all the algorithm behind social media, I like to pick and choose the news feed that are being fed to me. But Facebook primarily is to sell and buy things pretty much, or keep in touch with former colleagues from work. Okay. Families, not too much. For me, friends and relatives, I pick up the phone and call or send a text. My private lives remain private. I don't put that on social media.
Good. All right. So let me ask you all, we can take turns. What was the biggest barrier to getting started, if there were any barriers? Did you feel like before you started, you took a little while and you thought about it, or did you just go right into it without any trouble?
I think I did. I went right into it personally, and reason is I've always been fascinated by technology, and I'm a technology major by trade. So learning computer skills, being able to program, um, or coding was a little bit exciting for me. So to me, it became a hobby and then a career. But to me, it was like seamless. I had no hard time, no barriers getting into social media or using technology. And with my trade, what I do now these days, not that I'm being forced, but I have to keep myself apprised of anything that is happening when it comes to science. If it is a latest software coming out, what do they do? How do you utilize them? And then what are best to maximize or get the most out of it? To me, it's fun. I enjoy it. But at the same time, it could also be dangerous if it is put in the wrong hand or not know how to use it.
Okay. Clint, did you tell us what was your favorite app? I forgot if you did. If not, you can tell us.
I did not. Right now, I would say Twitter would be
Okay.
at the top of my list for social media use.
How did you get started? Was there any reluctance, or you went right in it? Like
No, I jumped right into it. I was
okay.
I was about a high schooler, so
Wow.
I dabbled my feet into
MySpace.
Black Planet and MySpace.
All right.
Those were the entry points for me.
Cool.
I don't necessarily want to say this was the stumbling block, but what kind of hindered jumping right into it back in those days was internet use.
David, what about you?
I would say probably
Excuse me.
because of travel, I like, of course, listening to any major kind of topics. So NPR was huge before, of course, things like podcasts came in. So now podcast has become huge now for me because I tend to listen to any missed broadcasting that has been done before. And I can also, of course, combine with either with the news or if there's any topics. But the biggest probably barrier I would say is falling, with what Neil said, falling into some addiction. So that would probably is my fear.
We're going to talk about that later on.
Yes. So, and time, I'll probably say time as well. Creating time has also been a barrier because you also have to create time and you also have to decide which device to use. I'm not sure if Clint and Neil have that challenge when you have an iPad and a laptop and your phone, which one do you use?
Good point. We may get to that later too.
Correct.
I want to ask you all, how often do you check your social media platforms? I know some people are really, like you said, addicted to it. And at the same time, just tell us, is there a favorite person that you follow that you would recommend that others follow? I know that we didn't get into following yet, but just curious, since you guys are all used to this whole scenario, overall, it sounds as though you've had good experiences. How often do you check your various social media apps per day? Clint?
If I'm being honest, it's probably a little bit too much compared to most individuals. Unfortunately or fortunately, now that we've got handheld devices, whether they're iPads or cell phones, your notifications go with you everywhere your device goes. So it becomes almost natural to check anytime the phone buzzes. So, to put it.
We have a tip for you later on about notifications. Okay, David and Neil, how often do you check?
I have to say at least 3 to 4 times a day I will do it. But what I've done is a shut off notifications and purposely that way I'm not addicted to it. But the news itself is one of my favorite apps is Business Insider because I'm always staying on top of what's going on around the world. That I check frequently because if there's a notification, I will check it right away. But for Facebook, maybe 2-3 times daily. But WhatsApp, it's whenever I get a thread or a text from a friend, I will check it right away. But my But what I have done to limit my WhatsApp exposure to social media, I use a different phone number that is totally different than my primary phone number. So that way, unless I give you my phone number, you have no idea that I'm on WhatsApp. So this is how I limit my exposure. But frequently, if I get a text or a WhatsApp, I'll do it right away.
Okay, David?
Infrequent as well, but also depends on how the notifications, I usually set them. So it also varies with whether it's the weekend or the weekday. In the weekdays, I try to limit as much as possible. The weekends are more open to, so it may be more frequent than the weekdays. So I try to make those variations between the weekend and the weekdays. So it's more frequently on the weekends than the weekdays.
And do any of you have any gurus or important people that you follow that you'd say you'd like others to consider following to learn some stuff from, or do you want to break it down? I know that you may follow some people for certain things, but whatever comes to your mind first is fine. Go ahead.
I'm a huge sports fan. So basketball and football primarily are my chief, or my chief sports. So on Twitter, I follow, and I would recommend anyone who's a fan of football and basketball to follow Adrian Wojnarowski. He's commonly referred to as Woj. He breaks news. He's like the gold standard when it comes to news in the NBA and on basketball. And Adam Schefter, again, the gold standard when you're talking to news breaking for football. And you'll notice anyone who's within the sports industry hold those two individuals in high regards because they're always breaking the news and they're always the first to do it. So if there's anyone who's looking for, individuals to follow in sports and they're big fans of basketball or football, I would say Adrian Wojnarowski and Adam Schefter.
Any preachers or no? Not really.
Preachers that I follow Myron Edmonds. I know he's a common name in the Adventist circles. And I also follow Travis Green. Travis Green is also a musician, but he's also a pastor of a non-denominational church in South Carolina. So those are, two preachers that I follow.
Okay. Mm-hmm. David?
I don't follow people per se. I would probably say shows and programs. So the shows I would definitely recommend, because I'm a big fan of NPR, would be All Things Considered. Yes. And Fresh Air. They are phenomenal. Yeah. That's one thing I would really encourage. And of course, for preachers in that side, like Derek Morris is one of my favorite. I also follow through. So
okay.
Yeah.
And Neil?
For me, I only have 2 individuals that I follow right now, but my list is probably biased. It'll be Elon Musk and Satya Nadella, which is the CEO of Microsoft. I'm in the technology realm. But in terms of favorite preachers that I follow, I'll say Miles Monroe is one that I follow, and Ravi Zachariah. Well, they're not Adventist, but the message that they preach is not too much of a different than what we have it ourselves. It's all evangelical anyway.
Yeah.
But my other companies as well that I do, like KKR, Zeiss, my former employer, which I like their technology. If you're into photography, for me, it's what they produce out there. If there's a common interest, if it becomes a hobby, I will link myself to the company that provides it just to stay on top of what's going on. But my list is very limited.
Okay, thank you very much. So now I'm going to share a few slides, and then I'll come back to you in a little while.
Sure.
I suppose you can see my first slide.
Yes.
So social networking, to people who are not used to it, it may seem as though this is something new, but actually it really has been around in different ways. I think if you go back to the Garden of Eden, I think it was clear that it wasn't good for a man to be alone. There was a need for some social life or socialization, and hence woman was made. Over the years, the telephone has been around, and that's still, one of my friends reminds me that is the single most reliable way to communicate. And so the telephone is still around. And as you know, even within our church community, there's a flourishing conference call group, a prayer group using the telephone. So we'll come to that later on, but I just wanted to make that point. So folks have been meeting people and introducing friends to one another for centuries. And so sharing ideas is nothing new. But social media for the uninitiated is about meeting people, making connections, building relationships, and sharing information. So this just shows you a few examples here. And there are now several choices in the social media world. And I've just picked a few here, and I won't even mention all the names of these, but the F, of course, is for Facebook, and that stands out, as I'll discuss in a minute. But we have many resources now to meet with each other, to share information, and even to do ministry if we choose to use social media resources to do that, so that this can be an important tool. This next slide shows you the world's most used social platforms. Facebook is at the top, which you probably all know, those of you who are watching with me. Someone has said that if Facebook were a country, it would be the largest country in the world. And Facebook usage is extremely high. Worldwide, YouTube is the next, although if you look at the US, it's a little bit different. But YouTube is also very widely used. And WhatsApp worldwide has a strong following. May not be quite as strong in the US, but it's still pretty strong here as well. And then there are several others down the line that I won't take the time to go through right now, although one tends to hear a lot about Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter in terms of social media platforms in the United States. And there are many others. I'll touch on a few in a minute. As I said, Facebook is more than just the largest country. There are roughly 2.53 billion smartphones in the world, and 85% of those smartphone users use a Facebook app. The app spans all generations, young and the old. Most of the users now outside the United States and Canada. It seems to become now more a mature user base. 65% of adults between 50 and 64 years of age use Facebook. And there are now progressively fewer and fewer younger people. The last time I checked, I think there were fewer than 50% of individuals who were 14 and under using Facebook. The demographic distribution is still a bit more female than males, but there are males. Here's an interesting stat. It says the average time spent on Facebook per user per day is about an hour, 59 minutes. This data comes from last December, 2019. Instagram is another very popular app. And this is mostly used for sharing pictures, videos. And although initially it was more those in the 20s and 30s, people who are a bit older are using it more and more. I know photographers tend to use it quite a bit. Teens like it a lot. Again, many of the users are outside the United States, but there's massive sharing of photos every day. At one count, 80 million photos shared per day worldwide. Twitter is another platform that you must know about, because this is the one that President Trump likes to use a lot. And it's a kind of micro blogging platform. It limits you to the number of characters you can use, so you don't get long scrolling text like some people will do in their text messages. Research shows that this is the one that men will tend to gravitate more so than the other platforms. And 86% of Twitter users use the site for news to keep up on information that's happening in real time. Every second, it is said 6,000 tweets are sent. But what is interesting about Twitter, there are many people who join Twitter just to follow and to listen and to learn. And so more than half of the users, although this is changing now, but this is earlier data, never post any updates, but still they're on Twitter, listening, learning. Snapchat came on the scene very much rapidly with a lot of fanfare. And for a while, I wasn't sure if it was going to survive, since Facebook was, incorporating a lot of the stuff that Snapchat was offering, but it's been doing very well. And it's liked quite a bit. And what it does is that it allows users to post a video or photo that will appear for a limited time and then disappears. And so there's something good about that, in that it just goes. Again, it's used by a younger audience, a lot of teens, and approximately 25 to 30 minutes are spent on Snapchat each day by the users. And a lot of individuals use Snapchat for stories. This is the hottest app right now, TikTok, embroiled in controversy as to whether or not it's going to be shut down in the United States or not, but it's extremely popular. Right now in the US, there are 100 million monthly active users in the United States. And in different variations of TikTok over the world, it's very widely used. In fact, over 1 billion users. But they're very young. Most are between 11 and 20 years old. One new study shows that younger people ages 4 to 15 spend an average of 80 minutes per day on TikTok. WhatsApp, you mentioned earlier, a number of you mentioned earlier, and to me, this is one of the most important apps. It's a free app. It's cross-platform, neutral, can be used on a desktop or your mobile devices. And whereas things like FaceTime are limited to the iOS or the Apple platform, WhatsApp can go Android, iOS, and it supports worldwide free calling, even if the people chatting are not in the same country. I call my relatives in the Caribbean on WhatsApp, in Canada, wherever. So it's really quite neat. And yeah, like I said, part of the appeal for WhatsApp is that it works on various phone and computer operating systems. And it uses your phone's cellular or Wi-Fi connection instead of your cell plan's voice minutes or text plan. So if you're connected via Wi-Fi, it won't eat into your data plan either. And the other thing that I like about WhatsApp is that it has more advanced security features than some other messaging apps. It includes end-to-end encryption. It doesn't store your personal information, and only people you approve as contacts can message you. YouTube and Vimeo are a little bit different, although I still put them in the realm of social media platforms. These are really video sharing platforms, but the videos that you find on YouTube are often exceedingly helpful. You buy a device you can't figure out, you want to fix your car, change your spark plugs, you don't know what to do. You go on YouTube, you do a search, and chances are you're going to find someone has posted a video. So YouTube has become exceedingly helpful. And it's everywhere, and almost any time you click on a video or any blog or feed, it takes you to YouTube, and if not, it takes you to Vimeo. And of course, videos can be very useful. There was a time when text was useful. Now we're in an era where people just want to see a quick video clip, and you can get their attention much more easily than text message. So we talked about YouTube being the third most visited online site in the world, behind only Facebook and Google. For those who are new to social media, it can be confusing, some of the jargon and the lingo that we use. And this is just a smattering of some of the social media lingo. There's a lot more. And if you're new, I'd say don't worry too much about it. But when you hear the term going viral, it just means that there may be a video or an image or a story that spreads quickly and widely over the internet, typically through social media, often through email. And when you hear the word trending, it just means that something is being widely mentioned or discussed on the internet, especially on social media sites. And memes are the latest rage, and these are just cultural items like an image or a video or phrase that is spread via the internet and often altered in a creative or humorous way, like the ones I show at the bottom of the screen. And then just two more hashtags. This is perhaps most popular for those who use Twitter, but in general, it can be used elsewhere as well. It's just a pound sign or symbol used to index keywords or topics on Twitter primarily. It allows people to easily follow topics that they're interested in. You don't have to search for all the terms, you know where to go with a hashtag in the word. And emojis are basically smileys or digital images that are added to messages to express a particular idea or feeling. You look sad, you're happy. I'm sure most people have used these. But what I would say is that there is a group of emojis that really are communicating very sexually explicit messages. And so that's not something you want to share, but you probably won't run into them since most people don't know about them. But just to say, internet is the internet and it can be neutral, it's how it's used, and the same thing goes with emojis. So in summary, I'd say that social media represents a frontier for connecting, sharing, marketing, and for news and entertainment. Just about everyone is on Facebook. It is a universal one-stop website. Instagram is highly visual and increasingly popular. Twitter skews more towards males. It's a place for news junkies and for short conversations. Snapchat is a very popular platform among younger people, and TikTok is most popular among tweens and teens and growing very rapidly. So now I'm going to switch back to the group, the panel, and we're going to go into some of our questions. Let's start first by talking about the term apps. Let's just, for the benefit of those who are listening, what are apps? Clint, let's start with you.
Apps are applications. It's really just an abbreviation of applications that you'll install on your phone or your mobile device or your computer. Obviously, the term is most popular now thanks to Apple and Steve Jobs. When the iPhone came out, I believe it was 2007. That was one of the selling points for the phone, applications that you could take anywhere. So that's in a nutshell what an app is, a small application that you can take on your mobile device.
Right, excellent. And having talked about apps now, let me ask you all, we're gearing this primarily to those who are late bloomers or beginners or thinking of entering the social media world, elderly. Which of the apps that we've mentioned so far would you recommend or consider perhaps the most appropriate for someone who's elderly or not really fully conversant with social media apps? I'll go through each of you. Start, Clint, you can start, we'll go around.
I would suggest, only because I've seen this in my circles, probably WhatsApp.
Okay.
Especially
WhatsApp.
Many of us are, everyone represented here is either from the Caribbean or from Africa, and we have or know individuals who that is almost their go-to application, mostly because it's an easy way to communicate with family and friends who are across seas. That's another big thing. They don't have to incur telephone charges as long as they can connect to Wi-Fi. So I think it would be the easiest. There's not a huge learning curve when you're talking about WhatsApp. It's really putting in a number, connecting to the internet, and connecting with those who you give that number to. So that's probably where I would encourage someone to start.
And David, what would you recommend?
I'd probably recommend YouTube.
YouTube.
And the reason being, the choice is based on age, interest. So with YouTube, there's a variety of searching on those interest areas, whether it is going to be news or probably suggestions even to the app. So the benefit for YouTube would be you'd be able to probably get some guidance on some apps that you can also use from YouTube. So I'd probably go with YouTube.
Okay, Neil?
I think I'll have to go with Clint. I think WhatsApp is a lot easier. The platform is intuitive. Acclamation is for an elderly or Generation X. They will easily learn it within a second. And the features, what is available, it's a two-way communications, or you can just be a bystander, belong to a group chat, and then just read and consume whatever feed that you're interested in. YouTube, to back up David, is a very nice platform, but it's a one-way platform per se. But if your common interest is to socialize, be connected, or whether it is within the US or internationally, WhatsApp offers you the more bang for your buck. And if you have a Wi-Fi connection, the sky is the limit. You can call anytime, anywhere, any place.
Right. So David, I think that you would probably agree. YouTube is one way, it has a lot of information, but if you want to communicate with somebody else,
that's correct.
Perhaps WhatsApp is going to be your first choice. The other reason I think WhatsApp is helpful, like you all said, it is very easy to use. It's basically your phone. You're used to using your phone. There's not much to do. If you can download the app, most people can show you how to get started if that's an issue, but it's almost like messaging and texting. And as we talked about earlier, it's pretty secure, and you can control who actually can send you messages and so on, who you want. And finally, it now allows you also to share videos. So you can make a regular phone call. You can also make a video call. I mean, I don't know how long it's going to stay free. Really, this is incredible bargain, in my opinion.
A long time, yeah.
Until they
think-
find a way to monetize it.
Right. I think if there's one thing that we could do, and I don't know that everyone knows how to maximize use of WhatsApp, but there are one or two people within our church community who use it heavily to pass on information about the church services and so on. It could probably be tweaked to be a little bit nicer and better, but it's a beginning. And as I go through this session, I do want to consider the possibility of what we did many, many years ago when I was education leader. We had sessions for computer class training. I mean, it was face-to-face. People like Brother Irish and Clyde Griffith helped me. But that really helped some people who really were struggling. Clearly, we can't do it now in the year of COVID, but it really got people into computers at that time to help them get moving. So I would agree that WhatsApp was an important first step. And perhaps the next one might be Facebook, but that requires a little bit more discussion. But I do want to mention, I hope I don't forget, you can remind me so I don't. I do want to say a few words about Zoom later on when we get past some of the real social apps. But I want to ask you now, what are some good uses of social media? Of course, I'm going to ask you the bad ones later on, but let's start with the good uses. And how do you see that these might fit in and benefit those who are, not fully conversant with the media and those who are elderly? I mean, particularly, how would you position this or frame the use of social media in that context?
I think social media, the bright sides of it can be emphasized now, especially because of COVID. Much more of these apps are becoming video focused because we have to maintain distance. So you're talking about WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Instagram, the list continues. It gives you a number of opportunities to have that two-way communication, like Neil pointed out. So I think that's probably one of the most positive things that can come out of social media in the time of COVID, where there's much more focus from all of these big tech companies on creating two-way dialogue. And regardless of the app that you begin with, there is the opportunity for you to have two-way dialogue as you learn the platform. So I think that's probably one of the biggest pluses for apps right now.
Okay, others want to chime in?
Yes, I would probably, of course, agree with Clint, and based on especially, of course, WhatsApp, what it does is it can allow you to join some discussion forum groups, which you can be able to share ideas and any news, and also an extension of a conversation. Mm-hmm. So, and it's within a certain group. So the benefit of that would be, it would be a group that is suited to a certain focus or a certain area that you want to discuss. So definitely that would be one of the big benefits.
Neil?
I agree with that. I think we're all in agreement. I mean, the biggest advantage of social media is information sharing. That's what it is good for. And if you have good intentions, whether it's a good program that you're planning on launching to communicate to the community at large, yes, social media is definitely a plus. Everyone right now is using it in their own private businesses, and because they want to communicate, get connected, and get the message out. And that's the best part of social media. And we all can agree to that.
Right. And like you said, Clint, in this time of COVID-19, you can see people as well, not only talk, and it brings you a little closer. And in the same context, I'm always surprised and a little bit miffed in our Sabbath school discussions on Sabbaths. People, the cameras are off. We're now using the small group discussion rooms, classes, and even there, people come on. But I'm saying you guys are defeating the purpose of coming together. We want to be close. We don't only want to hear you. We can pick up the telephone for that. This is a chance to be visually open and aware, as if you were going to church, in fact. So I don't know what it will take. So there are these nuances that come along sometimes. But what about the pitfalls? What are some of the pitfalls and dangers, though, particularly for those who are in the forever ministry group age range, that one must be aware of and be careful using social media? Any examples that you may have seen or come across?
There are too many to list.
Well, just one or two, yeah. I mean, so
absolutely, because right now with good information, there's also bad information. And if you look at, there's plenty of things, and there's a reason why even YouTube is rated 17 for, and that because there are type of contents out there that are limited to certain younger viewers. You don't want them to be exposed, whether it's pornography, violence, or crime, whatever it may be. I mean, social media is used for all those aforementioned bad titles that I just listed. But as a parent, I'm taking of it from a different angle here. We have to inform ourselves on how to filter out the bad and the good, and that it's a daily process, because with every application or software update, next thing you know, your security profile can easily be reset, and then you have to keep filtering that junk out. You have to be informed about technology to a certain level, and this is where I think that within this group, or even the church at large, we can offer our services and coach those that are looking for that type of service.
Okay.
I think one of the biggest pitfalls, and I want to piggyback on what Neil was saying. I think one of the biggest concerns for me, for any individual, regardless of age, who's just jumping into social media, is the importance of information vetting. A lot of individuals take, well, if it's on Facebook, it's gospel. If it's shared to me by sister so-and-so in WhatsApp, that means it's gospel. And I know, Doc, you can attest, you probably received some videos over your time that you're like, well, did anybody really pay attention to what such and such a person is saying? And I think that in itself can create almost a false sense of security, even within small groups. And you'll notice that on Facebook and in WhatsApp, individuals develop a set of comfort around those that they're with. They trust that the information that they're sharing is indeed good for them, to the fact where some people just do not vet the information at all. And as I'm sure we'll all hear, because we're in election season, now is a time when you're talking about disinformation campaigns, because individuals will just click a link and take it as gospel because it's on my favorite social media platform of choice. So that would really be my biggest recommendation to anyone who is going to start on social media, even if it's something as small as, sharing messages in a group chat. Always consider the source and vet before you share it with somebody else.
Indeed.
You've skipped to one of my subsequent questions. So while that's up, I'll go on that one a little bit further, and then David, you can add into this as well. My question was going to be, do you generally trust the information that you receive through social media? How do you handle a message or a video that you think may be fake news? And I like what you said, always ask about the source. Mm-hmm. When people tell me all these things about COVID, gargling with hot water or whatever, 5G did this, Bill Gates did this. What is the source? I say, particularly if you're looking for health information, did it come from the CDC? Did it come from a reputable university like the Mayo Clinic or Harvard? Look to see what is the source, not just somebody passing you a note on Facebook or WhatsApp. And my beef with Facebook, and I have many, is that rather than just being a sharing platform, they have now dabbled into news. They've dabbled into entertainment, into sports. They're into everything. And so people now think that getting your news on Facebook is equivalent to getting your news from NPR or some other reputable source. Mm-hmm. So David, I'm starting to say all that before we come to you. What are your thoughts on this? How do you judge and how do you handle what might be fake news? And what do you see as, pitfalls and dangers?
Yes, mainly I would probably say there's almost like 2 or 3 facets to it. So when I read the news or watch anything, I always have to ask myself, is it news that I can be able to validate and probably verify? 2, which actually currently, because it's this time of the probably an election year, some of the information and messages are entertainment, whether it's humor. So you have to decipher that and kind of differentiate between whether it is fast humor or entertainment. And then two, if it is really news, you don't have to go along with, as of course Clint said, you have to kind of validate and either double check before you even go along, because there's a lot of assumption that it could be true, but you have to probably more try and think through about the source and find out if there's some truth in it. That's how I usually kind of view anything I've read.
And the sad thing is that this isn't limited to medicine either. I mean, even some preachers, you know, I heard one preacher railing against Black Lives Matter because of one thing or the other. You know, you have to be so careful and not just accept one person's version and see if it can be corroborated by another source. So it's everywhere. The internet is open to anyone, and there's no rule or measurement or standard that's applied before you know, truth is there. What used to be truth has become very relative in this current era. So I do want to ask you though, what are some of the worst uses that you've seen of social media? You know, I'm sure you've heard of bad things, but I'd like to hear from you first. Despicable things.
Well, because I work with the pathfinders, the young people, one of the biggest things that you're facing when you're talking about dealing with kids is cyberbullying.
Right.
It's even more prolific now because so many of our young people have mobile devices. So you'll see, you know, inappropriate pictures taken and put online, bullying children based off of photos that they may or may not have taken. I know catfishing has become a thing now where, you know, you're trying to convince somebody else that I'm this gorgeous woman or I'm this buff man, and I kind of coerce you to send, you know, derogatory, or I shouldn't say derogatory, incriminating images or videos of yourself. And, you know, screen capturing is a big thing, you know, on mobile devices, and conversations in which you might think were private have now become viral. And I've seen, and I'm sure we've all read from news, you know, newscasts of young people who've taken their lives because they just don't know how to handle that. And it's not just limited to children. I mean, we see it on college campuses on a consistent basis as well. So, you know, that's something that immediately jumps out to me, you know, when we're talking about one of the, not necessarily the pitfalls, but the ugly side of social media, right. How quickly it is to share things that can ruin an individual's reputation or their life.
And before I forget, let me emphasize the point that anything that you place on the internet can go to anyone else on the internet. It's not secure. Don't ever put on anything or post anything on the internet that you don't want to come back and see right in your face, or even in the New York Times. Many people have lost their jobs because of posts that they made. They never thought anyone else would know. Many women have been blackmailed by their exes and vice versa. It's not a tool to be toyed with, posting stuff on the internet. Stays forever, just about. David.
Addiction to the internet, of course, that's one huge one, seconding to what Clint was saying with the privacy and messaging, which is also huge. But I think the addiction for me is the one that is huge, and it creeps in very easily without knowing, and sometimes it's hard to get out once, especially young people get into that high level of addiction where they cannot leave their device alone. So addiction to me, I would say, is probably one of the biggest pitfall.
Okay. Neil, did you?
Yes, I think that FOMO term, better known as fear of missing out, is well known out there. And that creates addiction for everyone.
Right. So we're going to come to addiction in a little bit.
Yeah.
Other than addiction, is there anything else that you would consider one of the worst things that you've seen on social media?
Violence and crimes, people being shot, being executed live on live TV.
People will do that live. And put it live. Can you imagine? Commit suicide, and it's all flowing through on the social media. to me, those are some of the gross things that I've seen or heard of, you know, sexual behavior until it gets taken down. Terrorism. I mean, these people just set the camera roll and go do it. This is the power and the evil of social media. On the other hand, it can become very useful, as in the recent case of George Floyd. You know, if it weren't for people with their cameras and social media, you know, these things were happening a long time ago, but now they're coming more to light. The sad thing is that even though they're coming to light, we're not seeing much real action. And that's the really troubling aspect of this. But those are some, I think, some of the good uses, but then there are also bad uses. I also would consider in this category what I would call annoyances. And for me, particularly in WhatsApp, I get very annoyed when people add me to their groups and don't tell me about it. I just take myself out, but it's a nuisance. And then there's some well-meaning friends, even in our church community, they've suddenly discovered WhatsApp. So they want to send me all the videos, everything that they read. I don't have the time, you know? It's just amazing. People don't think. They think because it's cool and cute to them, well, let me share it with this one. You know, you're overloading my box and my time, so I just have to delete you. And I wish people were a little bit more considerate. The other etiquette that I would mention is that when you're writing text, don't use capitals, because that sends a message you're shouting or screaming. And I think those little things are sometimes missed. And then my other peeve is the ones who send me text messages and they go on for pages and pages and pages. I said, send me an email, put in the document. I don't want to be scrolling for a minute or two in my text message. That's not what it's for.
Keep it short.
Huh?
Keep it short.
Keep it short.
Yeah.
Or put it in a document and then email it to me. So those are just some of my peeves, but if you have more, share them now so we can all get it out.
I think actually there are two that come in mind: extortion and hacking.
Yes.
So the hacking part, I just remembered in this, more especially in the mobile apps, there are banking apps that we have where we're entering our passwords and all that information. And other apps too, where we are also putting very sensitive information. So one has to be careful, because if you're using, say, the same password, you may be prone to hacking. So that's one thing actually I thought about that can be very important to make sure you don't use the same password across all apps and things like that. And change them.
And it's primarily now, even us, we are fully aware of phishing, which is a term where someone is trying to send you maybe a message with a link, and then you're not fully aware of it, and it takes you a second to click on it. Next thing you know, your phone is hacked. And I will advise everyone out there, if you receive a link, even from a trusted source, if you don't trust it, pick up the phone, confirm it to make sure that it is valid, because before you know it, you can lose all your data, your phone can be locked, your privacy could be gone.
For the last
I would completely agree with Neil. You know, you always want a kind of piggybacking on my last point of considering the source, especially when you're talking email. And Doc, this might be a separate conversation.
Yes.
But, you know, just because it says, you know, an email coming from PayPal doesn't mean it's coming from PayPal. You want to make sure you're paying attention to what is the address that it's coming from. Could it be PayPal@gmail.com? If that's the case, to Neil's point, you may be setting yourself up for a phishing, you know, a phishing attack. So, you know, a lot of those things are things that should be considered, especially when you're talking about links. Links are very easy to share via social media. They're short, you know, I can just grab them and send them through, and individuals, again, just click without looking at it. So I think really taking the time to consider the source of where your information is coming from, even from friends, before you click on it.
For the audience who's listening, just tell them what phishing is.
Neil?
Yeah.
The term phishing pretty much is the equivalent of someone trying to get access to your personal information. And usually it manifests itself by via a link. They will send you an email that is disguised as something else. Like Clint was saying, it looks like it is PayPal, but if you hover the link itself, it is a different address. And the best way to avoid it is before you click on the link, put your mouse on that actual link itself and see the display link. You'll get the full nomenclature and then confirm if it is bakeofamerica.com, or I can mask a link as bakeofamerica.com and then hide something behind it. And hackers, that's what they do. And this is how they fish for your information. It's like they're trying to hook you, and by giving you the impression of it's like masquerading.
Right.
I will have something look like another item or another object just to convince you that it is valid, and all to get your attention. If you don't confirm it, by the time you realize it, it's already too late.
So let me share with you what's been happening to me for the last month. I've been getting these repeated emails from Netflix, allegedly, saying, I'm in arrears, my account payment didn't go through. Why? I mean, my Netflix is through another source completely. So I look carefully. You know, it looks just like Netflix, the same red stuff. Hackers and phishers do this. They make it look almost exactly. So the way I figured out this was nonsense, I looked into the URL address and it says .ca. Well, I don't have anything in Canada with Netflix. So I know this is bogus. But what troubles me is that I've reported it as phishing now for like 3 times already, and I still keep getting it. So they're really trying still to make me flip out and go open it one time. So it can be very, they can be very clever, these hackers and these phishers. So you can never be too careful with your emails.
That is true. And with emails, unless you have your own, not even your own private servers or your private domain is still subject to phishing. But one of the reasons that I'm not that I'm endorsing Google per se, but Gmail does allow you to report a lot of phishing activities, and they themselves have the backbone to support it or to block certain exposures. But if you, let's just say it was the Church of the Oranges, you had like Clint at cotosda.org. And if you don't have the software available to support or to block that type of activities, you may install Norton or McAfee on your computer, but there's still that human factor, because if you're not smart enough to detect it, the software by itself is not going to be able to really help you. By that time, it's already too late. It's the equivalent of leaving the front door open all the time. But if you can get someone to lock the key for you, to lock that front door prior to you leaving it open, it's even better. Okay, so our time is going fairly quickly, so I want to cover a few things. David, I'll start with you on this one. Studies have shown that socializing alters brain activity, which decreases stress, anxiety, and depressive symptoms, and supports a calm and happy feeling. Social media has really taken advantage of this and is now, with artificial intelligence and algorithms and psychology, really manipulating our minds. And do you think this is why so many people seem to be hooked on social media? Or do you think there are other reasons why people might be hooked? Why do you think our people seem so taken up with it? Got to check it 8 times a day, every minute. What's going on here? Fear of missing out.
Yeah, it depends on. In some cases, like Facebook, I would say probably is a need for some, of course, going for need of approval. That is one. So they'll find themselves going in there. And the content also, I believe the content that we also view is also set up in a way where it's setting you up because those companies are profiting from advertisement. So whichever content sometimes gets presented to you, you will have all these adverts in between, and you'll stay on as you're forwarding. So there's a lot of I would say way of attracting you not to leave the device. So that's one thing I would probably say that is very, very huge, and to keep you on the device or rather on the application where you don't want to leave. Yeah. So yeah. So depending on what you want to do.
So I'll tell you this. This has been shown in neuroscience research that social media addiction is largely driven by brain pathways. We call it the dopaminergic system. The dopaminergic system is a reward system in our brains. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter that plays a role in motivating behavior. And what we now know from brain scan studies is that the addict, the heroin addict, the social media addict, and other addicts, the same areas in the brain light up when they're in their addictive behavior. So that really the brain doesn't see it much differently. And what dopamine does is that things that make you feel happy and make you feel good, it motivates you to do the same thing over and over again. And now these social media gurus and organizations know this, and they're playing with us. I don't know if you've read, I'm going to come to this in a minute, or seen the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma. But before that, let me read you something that, another book that's very nice that I read, it's called The Twittering Machine. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, by Richard Seymour. And in this book, here's one of the things that he says, and Clint, I'll ask you to react to this one. He says, Mark Zuckerberg is not pointing a gun at anyone's head, ordering them to use Instagram, and yet people behave as though he is. What's wrong with us?
You are so true. It's very
true. That's very true.
It's very, very easy to blame Mr. Zuckerberg for a lot. I was with another group church-wise before I get to a direct answer to your question, and there was a suggestion of, well, maybe we continue our conversations that we have in Zoom on a Facebook group. And I mean, there was obviously was going to be a private Facebook group, but just the sheer mention of Facebook, everyone brought out their conspiracy theories about Zuckerberg and why you can't trust him and this, that, and the third. But as it pertains to that quote, I think it's very true. And it also plays into what you said about addictions. Facebook is not forcing any of us to log into their website and spend an hour of our time, on their mobile app. Same thing with Instagram. However, to Brother David's point, they are capitalizing on that. You come and spend some time with us. We're not telling you have to leave, but we're going to give you every reason to stay. So, like with anything else, there needs to be a level of accountability and self-policing when it comes down to social media. So again, it's the popular thing is to blame big tech, but big tech is not, they're not forcing us to use to use it. They're just making it a lot easier for us to use it.
You're right, but we cannot ignore the neurological aspect of it, because the dopamine effect does exist, and
Definitely.
You have computers thinking ahead of you. Oh, I think Clint Neal might be interested in this feed because they're surfing on the internet for bike, or they're surfing on the internet for cars or boat. Before you know it, all you're looking at is thread with boats, cars, or bike, whatever area of interest you may have. And the artificial intelligence right now with machine learning, that's what they do. It's like they predict your behavior ahead of time. And then by doing so, you're being hooked. It's hard for you to break that cycle. But I think we have the responsibility ourselves to educate even us as adults to know when to take a sabbatical from our devices. In fact, CNN wrote a nice article years ago on how to take a sabbatical from your device. That was really quite interesting. I'll be glad to share it with you guys later on. But the big media players, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, name them, they also have that responsibility towards society to make their platform a little bit easier for people to take a break from it. But question is, when it comes to profit, how do you balance the two between making money or looking at the human aspect of things? Doc, I think that will be your area to answer.
All right, so we need to move towards the last question. I just want to make one more comment on that. And again, from that book, The Twittering Machine, he says, the problem is the hijacking of the brains of users. And these guys know how to overtake us by playing with the dopamine feedback loop, exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. So really, it's a massive issue. It's going to get worse. Artificial intelligence and all the algorithms, it's not easy to avoid it. So we have to be constantly trying to be a step ahead if we can. And this is why people don't realize it. I really would like, if you haven't watched yet, and all those who are listening to us, please, if you can, if you had Netflix, please watch the documentary, The Social Dilemma. It is really something that is worth watching. It was revealing. There we have many people who've worked in the social media field, people at Google, people at Facebook, who left the companies because of some of the things that they were doing and the way they were manipulating human behavior. You will be amazed. You really need to be aware of what's happening. The Social Dilemma documentary on Netflix is worth your time. Let me now talk about church in closing. Regarding church, how has the shift to virtual church affected your use of church and other social media? How important have these platforms become to you? And quick answers. Let's go around, quick round robin, so we can get another question as well before we close. So let's start with you, David. How has the shift to virtual church affected your use of the church social media and other social?
Yeah, of course, one of the huge things has been the big thing gap is that the social aspect of it, which we know. So, for instance, for church, for the lesson, the discussion is more interactive when we are face to face. But now, because we are using Zoom, it's okay, but again, it's kind of different. That is one. Two, when it comes to
we got to go around quickly. We're out of time. Go ahead.
Yeah. To the last for the sermons and preaching, same way. There's also that interactivity that misses when you're at church, or rather just watching via Facebook or just YouTube. So that's my take on it. That social part is a part that is huge for me that I'm missing.
It's huge.
Yeah.
For me, I make a lot of use of YouTube now. There's a lot of information, a lot of sermons that are available for me to watch. I do miss the camaraderie, being in the church, being able to interact with my brethren. But I have to say, with Zoom now, I think it allows us to get closer. So for us to communicate, it has to be intentional. So we make the effort to participate or to reach out to our peers, our brethren in the church, our sisters. And but not everyone has that experience. Question is, how do we take it to the next level to make sure that everyone is at a bare minimum has that platform that is available to them to communicate or to socialize? But I'm making the best of it.
Clint, I'm asking that question, but another one. And I noticed that no one said specifically, well, I shouldn't say that. David is saying, I want to get an idea of how you're living in the Zoom virtual world of church, because many people have gone now church surfing. They don't even look at our church anymore. And that's one thing that's happened because of the choices that they have, whether it's YouTube or another Zoom service. But Clint, I wanted to ask you as well, how has that affected you moving to Zoom, to virtual church within your realm of, all the things that you do with the media? And secondly, what should we do better?
So for me, the shift to virtual on a personal level has afforded more time with my family. Mm-hmm. Whereas, unfortunately, and I think this is the case for many, regardless of denomination, unfortunately, when we're in the building, we spent more time in the buildings than in our homes. For some of us, not everyone. The virtual sense keeps you at home. And it's a whole lot easier to say, you know what, I'm not going to this meeting today. Or as opposed to where, when you're on site, well, I'm already at church, the meeting, they say it's only going to take a half hour and it lasts 2. Personally, it's a lot more control. I agree with you in the sense where, because we now have so many options in terms of church, we don't necessarily have to watch Church of the Oranges. Church has almost become like cable TV, where you have too many options. And just about everybody has worship service at the same time on Sabbath. So there's really no incentive for me to watch what I'm doing at my church. Whereas when you had to go to the building, you didn't really know what was going on at Montclair, or you didn't really know what was going on at Living Faith. Now, you know, I can sit on my couch and decide, you know what, I'll watch Church of the Oranges on Thursday when I've got nothing else to do in between my shows. But I think ultimately it comes back to what both David and Neil said. I think the biggest thing that everybody is yearning for, and most churches are trying to figure out, even our own, is camaraderie, whether it's through small groups meeting on Zoom, like the Forever Young group, or like the married couples do, you know, once a month, trying to find a way to continue to utilize the technology to come together, even if it's in a virtual sense. So I think more and more churches are going to lean towards that, more so that the weather is shifting and we're kind of going to be forced in our homes as opposed to the summer. So that's my 2 cents.
And David, anything you'd add to that?
Yes, the only thing I can add to that is I think this epidemic has brought a very big shift to all institutions, and the church being one of them, where no one was ever prepared that it would take this long. And I think the changes and the way everything is evolving is what would be interesting to see, the lessons we learn from this time. So,
Neil? Thank you.
I think everything's been said already. I think at this point, it is our responsibility to take the technology that is available to us and then maximize it for the glory of God. I think it is there. And those of us that are afforded the opportunity, it is our responsibility to also teach those that are looking on how to maximize it or use it. And we are available for you guys.
Yeah, very well.
One thing I want to add, Doc, before you move on, to our late bloomers as well as, you know, our younger folks, this is the new norm. You know, even with even once we get on the other side of the pandemic, you know, the technology that many of our churches have been fighting to use is now here to stay. So it's incumbent on us individually to learn how to use the technology in a safe manner. And it's also incumbent on the churches to find a way to maximize getting the gospel out to all the world. We no longer have the excuse of not being able to.
And I like what Neil
maybe that's the silver lining in all this.
Yeah, maybe it's a silver lining. But I like what you said, Neil, that we also have to offer ourselves to help those who don't know how to use the technology, because it's going to be here. This is the new norm. You're right. And, you know, we're trying to build ourselves a class. We meet regularly in Zoom. I would like to see other small groups doing the same thing to keep their members together, you know, and form a little circle if necessary. So it is a new norm. You're absolutely right. And just to sum up in closing, I'd like to say that keep in mind, if you're someone already on social media, you love to share, before you share on WhatsApp, be sure you share, before you share news, be sure you check the source. Stop and think before you share it, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And for those of you who are already addicted to your Facebook and all those things, I say to you, one tip is to turn off notifications so you're not being bothered every minute. That's a real helpful tip that has been offered by some computer gurus and experts. So gentlemen, I thank you so much for your time. Appreciate everything that you've shared with us. I hope this has been helpful to those of you who are listening. And I think we're gonna have to do this more than once, because it takes, some would say, 7 times to hear new information before it really sinks in. And there are many steps towards becoming more skilled and proficient at using social media, whether it be Zoom or WhatsApp. So again, I thank you. And as we leave, let's not worry too much about COVID or the chaos all around us. Remember that God is our refuge and strength, and he will take care of us despite what may befall. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Bye.